So to introduce us, so we're the Organic Council of Ontario, otherwise known as OCO. And our job here at OCO is to be the voice for organics and to really promote the organic um, farming, organic keeping of animals, and in general, healthy farming and healthy products and getting that out to people. We actually represent over 2,000 different people in the organic value chain here in Ontario, and we've got a number of things that are going to be coming up this summer. So we've got an organic tour that we'll be offering. Next week, we have a talk about grants and other funding sources available to those that are looking for funding sources, which is a lot of us. And yeah, we've got of course we'll have our conference in the winter time and a lot happening in between. So before we get started, I'll introduce myself. So I've got bios for everyone. My role here at OCO is I'm actually the executive director, and I've been here since October. But my role in the rest of everything that I've been in the last 20 years has been a beekeeper scientist. And so I actually do research with honeybees and bumblebees. I've also been the chairperson of our Bee City Kitchener and just a whole life revolving around pollinators and bees. So I'll be joining in on this discussion today because it's World Bee Day, and there's very few people that probably love bees more than I do. So I'll be talking about them today, but we've got some other people who love bees and plants. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Liette Vasseur. I hope I did not chop that up. Uh, so Dr. Vasseur is a professor in the Department of Biological Sciences at Brock University. She is a member of the Environmental Sustainable Research Center and a Cool Climate Enology and Viticulture Institute. Enology, did I say that right, Liette? What does enology mean?
Is the study of the wine, the yeast, and everything else.
Okay. This is like I learned a new word right now. And a fellow. So since 2014, she holds the UNESCO Chair on Community Sustainability, which is a really big deal to have a UNESCO chair. So awesome, Liette. From local to global. Vasseur's research program works at the nexus of several disciplines, allowing her to develop transdisciplinary research that join issues such as conservation, sustainable agriculture, climate change, adaptation, and resilience, community-based ecosystem management, and ecosystem governance. Her research is in, get this, Canada, China, Ecuador, and Africa, including Benin and Morocco. In Canada, major projects focus on sustainable agriculture and climate change adaptation in rural and coastal communities and conservation in the Niagara biosphere. Aspects of gender, EDI, and cultural identities are important in her research in Canada and beyond. As a member of the UNESCO International Consultative Group of Experts for Closing the Gender Gap in Science. Woohoo, close the gender gap. Stewardship also is part of the activities of her chair, where knowledge transfer and translation ensure accessibility of the research to all communities. Her community research work with the city of Greater Sudbury led her to receive in 2011 the Latornal Pioneers Award from Conservation Ontario. She has over 160 publications and more than 280 presentations as a researcher. She is the deputy chair of the Commission for the Ecosystem Management and the International Union for Conservation Nature, co-lead of the Climate Change and Biodiversity Policy and Practice Group, chair of the North American region. She is also the ICN Academy Advisor Committee and chair the Knowledge Management Strategic Committee. She's also currently the co-editor of Botany at the Canadian Science Publishing, member of the board of directors of Nature Canada, and former president of the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. And Liette, you are definitely an overachiever. Wow. I just got through that. I had not looked through all this before. So I'm going to say also, Dr. Vasseur is a partner of OCO in the organic science cluster. So we'll talk a little bit about the research that she's actually doing right there in the Niagara region with wineries today. But we also, you don't have that on your long list. That's how we don't even rank up there with all the amazing things that you do. So we do. So yeah, so thank you so much for joining us, Liette. And our second guest today, actually, if you guys just say hi, I think your pictures will pop up as people's primary picture. So if you take your mic off for a second, yeah. All right. Oh, no, there we go. Okay, so we have Crystal Bradford and Liam. Oh man, Kajewski? Did I
Yep.
say that
Sounds
right?
good.
All
Yep.
right. Of wildlife gardening. And they're right here in Ontario. What's town are you guys closest to there?
Ingersoll.
Ingersoll. All right. I was just there the day before yesterday, but I didn't notice the town name. So wildlife gardening is their company. They're passionate about the wonders of the natural world and sharing them with others. Wandering alongside their mothers in the garden when they were young sparked their ability to see the magic of the natural world. After Crystal finished schooling at the University of Waterloo in the ecology department, the two launched their ecological landscaping and native plant nursery, Wildlife Gardening. Working contract jobs as well to gain more hands-on experience in the field, they worked in prairie, gravel pit, and stormwater restoration, green roofing, and pond installation. Liam is a certified seed collector with the ministry and loves to collect seeds for healthy genetics. They also run Trash Theater, a science and art business for kids focused on inspiring youth to feel empowered to look to nature for solutions to problems that seem overwhelming. And I will say, I'm in my own backyard back here, and I actually do have a stream, a waterfall, and a pond that wildlife gardening put in, along with something like 100 pollinator, not 100 different, there's more than 100, but 100 different types of plants out here for pollinators. So fantastic work that they do. So we're going to get started. And so the way that this will be going today is we basically have some guiding questions to get us started, but we really just want to talk today about the importance of bees because it is World Bee Day and that relationship they have with plants. And really the best thing that you can do at home is to actually create habitat and provide food. And so we'll be talking about that, but we're also going to talk about some of the really neat work that Liette's team is doing in terms of promoting health on farms, using native plants and how that all comes together as well. So, and then if you have questions, go ahead and put them into the chat. And so you just go ahead and put them in the chat. We won't be taking questions through the initial speaking part, but at around 3:45, we'll switch over. And if you have some questions, you can ask them or put them into the chat. And we'll we'll try to get to as many as we can. And the other thing I want to say is that this is being recorded and will be available on YouTube. And if you can share it, really just to get out the great work that everybody is doing and spread the bee love, that would be fantastic. So, all right, let's get started. So I think the first question I'm going to start with, I'm gonna start with you, Leah and Crystal. And first of all, I'm just going to ask you, where are you right now?
We're actually in our nursery and we're under the canopy of like some amazing sugar maples that were on an old farmstead. And these sugar maples were tapped for years and they are one of the first, amazing pollinator friendly food for the ones that wake up early, especially with unpredictable climate that we're having. It's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. And Leah, where are you coming from today?
Currently, I'm at home in my office. I did go in the backyard where I have the native species, but just because my neighbors are doing their mowing their grass, so it would be a little bit too noisy. But I should say I put I'm gradually removing all the grass that was there to have more native species. So I planted another long stretch of a few meters again this year, this spring. So
Awesome.
yeah, and doing a lot of garden. I still like to be outside.
Yeah, I think any of us that love pollinators and plants are just way happier outside than inside. At least for me, that's absolutely true. So, anyways, I'm at my house as well. So I'm in Kitchener, Ontario, and I'm in my backyard here. This is my dog Kiva joining us, and I have all sorts of pollinators around here. Got lots of stuff blooming, and so I like challenge everyone today to go out and actually see how many bees and other pollinators you can actually find once you start looking for them. It's amazing, the species that are out there. There's a huge amount of different bees because it is Bee World Day. And across the Canada here and well, North America, we have thousands upon thousands, and I'm not even going to give an exact number because it keeps adding up, but thousands upon thousands of different types of bees, and the majority of them are solitary bees that are not you're not as familiar with, that are use the habitat that you actually provide for them. So sometimes that habitat can actually be in the stone around your house, the grouting. So there'll be bees that will go into those spaces and cavities. Very, very often into the ground, and having packed ground is actually really fantastic for providing habitat for those bees. But sandy ground, there's some bees that actually absolutely love sandy soil as well. There's some that will go for mud if you have a mud pile nearby. And then, of course, trees, decaying wood. And I imagine that Liam and Crystal and maybe Liette will talk about the stems of plants as well that can provide amazing habitat. So with all of those different bees in the world, I am a beekeeper. I obviously focus on honeybees, but that's really because they're really easy to like look at because they stay in a box and I can steal honey from them and study their behavior. And I've actually done some research with bumblebees, looking at their memory and studying them as well. But we often are working with those particular bees because they're easy for us to get, they're easy for us to reproduce, and they're also just an innate part of agriculture as well. So we've been using that for a long time. But I always want to say that they are not the only bees out there. They represent a very, 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 very small percentage of bees, and are actually not primary pollinators for most things. So on World Bee Day, we want to make sure that we're talking about all of the bees. So that being said, Liette, do you have a favorite pollinator or bee that you love?
Oh my God, there are many bees, I should say. I'm thinking about the mason bees and the carpenter bees. They are fascinating because they, as soon as the wood becomes a little bit old, and they like to be able to make holes, and they are semi-solitary. They are still a little bit a group, but not they are eusocial, as we say. These are the type of I have a colleague of mine working on them. That's quite interesting, and yeah. And you're right. There are so many different species of bees in North America. Even just in Canada, we're talking over 800 different species. So yeah, there are so many of them. And I like the bumblebees. I'm always happy when I start seeing the bumblebees in my garden. I know that that means that the pollinators are coming, because we have to remember that the one in the soil take a bit longer because the soil has to warm up before they can get out. So that's also another thing to be aware. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the neat things that I found out long before I started studying bumblebees is that they actually have antifreeze in the bodies, the queens. They have polyethylene glycol. And when they overwinter, they just go like not very deep into the ground and stay there over winter. And so, it's easy to disturb them. And so I've always been encouraging people not to go rototilling right away in the spring or when they're raking, to be very gentle. But anything that can disturb that habitat. And bumblebees are really fantastic because they will come out in the rain. They actually come out in the cold. I put them on a hascap crop when it was like 0 degrees outside, and even the hive was still like moving around, and within just a few degrees they were actually out and doing pollination, because there's a lot of things that do come out early that do require pollination, and a lot of bees either haven't emerged, especially the solitary bees, or the honeybees. They actually require it to be at least 10 degrees or warmer, generally depends on the honeybee. But yeah, so they are very important part of our ecosystem here. How about you, Liam and Crystal? I'll start with Liam. Liam first. Liam, what's your favorite?
It's obviously, yeah, it's hard to pick a favorite, but because we're talking about native plants, there's a cool thing in our yard where we get the leafcutter bees coming around, but they seem to consistently use 3 species: the native sugar maple, the showy tick trefoil, and the pawpaws. And we've been at this property 5 years, and we noticed it at our last property. There would be a pawpaw leaf that gets so cut by the leafcutter that it ends up looking like an oak leaf or something. But yeah, they're really cool because I don't see them grabbing from ornamental exotic plants. You'll see the holes cut out in the leaf, right? And
Yes.
then I actually was grabbing kindling for my fireplace this winter, and I came across a row of them inside of a twig. I went to break it open, and I could see the rolled up leaf. And yeah, apparently, they're in there all winter, waterproof, waiting for the spring and stuff. But yeah, they need these particular leaves that they're used to roll up to put their eggs inside for their larvae.
Yeah. Are they really soft, those particular leaves, compared to other ones, or are they like just durable?
No, that's a good question. They're probably like fairly pliable and soft.
Maybe
Like
tasty.
maybe tasty. Yeah, that's hard to say. It's hard to say.
You don't want a bad taste in your mouth.
But yeah, it's funny. Like year after year, the same plants will be used, and like I'm sure there are other species being used, but these are the 3 that I've noticed, and I haven't noticed them on exotic things.
Yeah.
Are they out already? Have they started? Because I know they're a little bit later usually.
I haven't seen evidence of them yet,
Yeah.
and I wish I kept that twig marked. Like I put it back together and stuck it back on the twig pile, but I don't know which one it is, and if they've emerged, I imagine so. But
My bee favorite, it's hard to pick, but bumblebees are pretty cool just because I think they're the ones that people are less scared of. So it gets other people in love with them. Buzz pollination, super valuable. So we have blueberries because of that, because they are strong enough with their vibrations to knock the pollen off and stuff. So it's pretty awesome. But all bees are valuable, even the wasps and everything like that kind of get a bad rap. They're super vital to the whole system.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's actually interesting how the bees do different pollinations, and the bumblebees, they do like this where they grab on and they just vibrate, and they shake everything down. And in fact, on my hascap, when they're pollinated, the flowers actually turn brown because they've basically had a trauma that's happened. The bumblebees doing their things, and then the bumblebees also know that they've been pollinated. I know that the bees will actually see and oh my gosh, infrared, ultraviolet, help me out there.
ultraviolet.
Thank you. Like, which one is it? I'm having a brain fart. And the color of the flowers will actually change when a bee has visited it, we don't see it, but they can actually see that in ultraviolet. But it's very obvious on these hascap, and there's probably other plants as well. I know grapes and such will also have that pollination that, and I don't know if it leaves like a brown flower afterwards, like we see on the hascap.
No, in fact, grapes don't, they are self-pollinated, so they don't need
They don't need it.
they don't need the bees, no, but,
I see the
it's
bumblebees
interesting.
on the grapes.
Sorry?
I've seen bumblebees on grapes.
Yeah, but it's usually probably just for standing there, not necessarily to pollinate. Yeah, that's the
Oh,
main thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's actually a great segue into what you're doing. So you basically end up bringing pollinators into grape orchards,
Mhm.
but they're not needed for pollination. So what are you doing, and what's actually going on there?
Yeah, but we're using a native species because what happened is, well, we have to remember, first of all, vineyards, like a lot of other type of agriculture, that it's orchard or monoculture in general, you have only one species. And but what happened, because this is a perennial system, in between the rows, you have possibility to put vegetation. In the old days, they were removing all vegetation as much as possible. And I should say, even in France, there are many vineyards that they still don't have anything. So you have erosion, you have and evapotranspiration from the soil and all that kind of stuff. So for a while, people were using grasses, but with grasses, okay, you can consider that probably green manure by the end of the year, but it's still usually exotic species that are used, mostly ryegrass and others. And you don't attract anything. So you don't bring any type of ecosystem services. So in terms of regulation of the water, regulation of different things. You can use some commercial species, and some people will use, for example, um, um, alfalfa or things like that. But again, we're talking commercial exotic. What we're doing now is testing and working on and adding native species that are from here, because they have co-evolved with our ecosystems. And what it does is first, they are better adapted to the conditions, climatic conditions, environmental conditions, but at the same time, they are also providing nectar. And one thing that was mentioned is wasps. But wasps are super important because they are the parasitoids that will control, in many cases, for example, the leafhopper, which is a huge problem in vineyards. So that's one thing. They will also attract some beetles that the same way, or mites that will attract, that will become at that point predators of the pests that you find in vineyards. So you bring in some way ecosystem services that in many cases will be useful. And I should say that even some vineyards now, when they do put more and more native species, because of all the pollen and the nectar that are produced, will often have a few beehives, for example, because it attracts different things and all that. So this is one thing, is it's a question of enhancing ecosystem services. It helps in terms of adaptation to climate change, because these species usually are perennials. They are better adapted to the conditions. They are better capable of stabilizing the soil. So they have really several benefits, that it's not necessarily just the vineyards and the vines, but also the full ecosystem as a whole. So that's the main thing, is trying to change the mentality that because you have a monoculture, it has to be perfectly, just pure grass or pure soil, but really bring the other aspects of bring other type of ecosystem services at the same time.
And so what species are you guys using in your study right now?
Oh, we have several. It's changing a bit this year, but we have, for example, Coreopsis, so lentleaves, Coreopsis. We have brown-eyed Susans. We have bee balm. So we have quite a good list of species. And we were surprised. Last year was the first year, and the plots that we had, they established very quickly. Several of them started flowering from the first year. So that's something that is quite positive. So this year we have expanded, in fact, the for longer rows of native species. They were just planted last week. So crossing our fingers that everything established as well as last year. And because it was quite amazing. In fact, in one of our vineyards, the density is so high now that we have less weeds than we had last year. So that's also another aspect. It's kind of a weed control at the same time. So
Yeah, and the whole idea of being a weed is something that you don't want there, right? So um for Liam and Crystal, like so she's working, you know, kind of with not kind of with farming, using these native plants to help manage in a more natural way the predators that are there. Do you guys have, like, she's listed some plants that like are really helpful for that. Do you guys have some plants that you know that would maybe be helpful for, and maybe not just for vineyards, but for other farmers to use for management?
Yeah, Crystal just pulled a stem of the giant or tall sunflower. It's a perennial tall sunflower, about, I don't know, up to 3 meters tall, almost 10 to 12, 13 feet. But I don't know if you can see, there's a whole bunch of holes in this stem. And this is the first year we've actually seen woodpeckers eating from perennial plants. So woodpeckers, you know, they'll eat the dead wood, they'll eat bugs out of them, but we always see them in trees and shrubs and never perennial plants. So this year, the first time we saw them eating out of a perennial plant because there's so much life inside of it. So the tall sunflower.
Tall sunflower cup plant are also things that you can use as ethanol for if you don't want to be planting every year for farmers too. So there's neat native perennials that they could be using instead of, you know, planting lots of corn. I know it's harder to get in. The drier springs can be hard too. But it's really kind of important with what you were saying, Liette, that continuous corridors are really important in our city too. So we can have genetics, not just to like get rid of different pests, but to allow for genetics to, so we're not inbreeding different things, like continuous corridors. And for squirrels in Chatham, Kent are a big thing, the flying squirrels, because they couldn't, you know, get around. And living snow fences, there's a lot in St. Jacobs that are awesome. So instead of having to pay municipal funding for that, as well as like accidents because we get snow after the snow fence has been taken down. There's some really cool things we can do with planting these continuous corridors that are living fences, reduce soil reduction, erosion and stuff too.
And then as far as some particular like species, the penstemon, the native penstemon, the foxglove beard tongue and hairy beard tongue flowers, it's kind of, they're almost like the perfect size for smaller bees like honeybees and orchard bees and stuff to go inside and come out of. And we've actually seen where one was going into the flower, and as it came out, it went to another flower, got body checked out of the way, and a bee went into it. The bee that got body checked came to the flower and extracted the other bee out of the flower and got into it. So it's that prized, I guess, that these bees were fighting over the white bellflowers of the foxglove beard tongue, Penstemon digitalis. And they're just like, they're often used in gardens because they can be nice showy plants, but they'll get, you know, lots of floral bloom at once, and then you'll get lots of pollination happening.
And they're good for helping with like growing more tomatoes, because you're having a food source for the bumblebees to be there to pollinate your tomatoes too. That is sustaining them when there's not flowers of your garden.
So I know we've had wasps, I think, have come up already a couple of times. And so for those of you that maybe don't know, wasps and bees do not belong in the same family. So there's, wasps will actually eat bees. Actually, wasps eat pretty much anything. They love sweet things. They love protein, and so they are definitely a sometimes annoying part of the ecosystem for us. If you include humans as being part of the ecosystem, because they will start to go after sweet sugary drinks in the fall, and they also will they also sting over and over and over again, whereas most bees usually won't sting unless provoked, and if they do, especially honeybees, they sting once and they'll die. But I did want to bring along, I also brought some show and tell. So I have this here. So this is actually a paper wasp nest, which is really neat because they basically chew up and spit out and make like all these layers, and then they have their babies here. But very similar to the bumblebee, the wasp queens will overwinter, and they will then come out again, similar to a lot of these other species, and emerge and start to build up their colony. Whereas honeybees will actually maintain a colony of like 10,000 bees or so over an entire winter. So they'll go down from 40, 50,000 bees down to 10, 20,000 bees over winter time. But there's really a symbiotic relationship between wasps and bees, and really at the end of the day, if we didn't have the wasps, we wouldn't have the plants to feed the bees. and if we didn't have the bees also pollinating and doing what they're doing, we maybe wouldn't have as much foliage. So there, and wasps, I should say, also provide lots of pollinator services as well. So even though it is World Bee Day, I just want to do a shout out to our wasps, and I know that a lot of people don't love them, but if you can provide food for them in your area that you're in, they'll be less likely to come after things that you're eating. But in the fall, they actually the queen quits laying her babies, and the babies in here will actually produce a sugar substance that feeds the adult wasps. But once she quits laying that, they don't have that sugar substance anymore, and so they have to go out and look for it. And they've got these all these places they're going to go look for sugar, and there's oftentimes not enough around. So that's why we do tend to see them in the fall a little bit more. They get a little crazy, but for most of the summer, they're going to leave you alone and they'll just do their thing. In terms of like, Liette, with your research, and you were talking about these wasps acting as predators, how do they actually work in a vineyard, that they like take care of these leaf hoppers and such?
Yeah, so what happened is these wasps, well, first of all, they need the small flowers. So I'm glad that you were talking about the small flowers. And in vineyard, we try to have short plants because of the airflow for the vines. But these wasps will lay their eggs either in the eggs, the pupa, or the directly the adult, but mostly the eggs and the pupa of the leaf hopper. So they will be able to get into it, and this is how they control. In fact, interestingly enough, even in China, in the tea plantation, because we work in organic tea plantation there, we are promoting, for example, Cortesia, which is a wasp that will be able to parasite, if you want, the Amphogatus onukai, which is the most important leaf hopper there that they have. And it's the same, it's trying to bring back these native wasps that for a long time were disseminated because of pesticides. But now with the push for organic tea because of FAO and the standards, it's better for them to go to try to have more parasitoids and all these species. So it's the same here. We're trying to find a way that because we have to remember when we look at pollinators, yeah, the wasps, the bees are super important, but we also have the butterfly, the beetles, the moth, the hummingbird we know very well. So, and even the flies in some cases. So we have so many other pollinators that are very important. And this is why having a high diversity of species can help not only the bees, but also all these other pollinators that are super important because they have different roles. Like the wasps, because in many cases they are parasitoids, so they can control pests. It's the same for some of these beetles. So this is the thing, is it's all these interactions that are super important when we look at an ecosystem.
Yeah. And how about for Liam and Crystal, do you guys find that like because you guys you're out your nursery there, you guys have like a lot of diversity going on. Do you find that like the and I say the wasps, and again, just like the bees, there are so many different types of wasps, and solitary wasps versus wasps that live in a, I don't know, eusocial sort of situation. So there's a lot going on. In fact, I have a this is like a little native bee house that uses like bamboo shoots, and I call it my parasite wasping raising area, because that's usually what ends up happening, is that the bees will put them in, and then I get to watch the wasps go in and out and enjoy the buffet and lay their eggs, etc. But I'm wondering with you, where you guys have like all these different plants and everything that's going on there, do you find that that there's less wasps, like yellow, and I want to say wasps, yellow jackets, hornets, like all of the kind of annoying fall ones? Do they start bothering you? Do they bother you less where you're at because of all the food sources?
Yeah, like as far as, bringing out food to have a picnic or something, I don't really worry about the wasps. It's more like, because it's an old pork farm and there's old barns, it's more the flies that that just come around. But yeah, there's lots of stuff for them to eat, and like Liette was saying, the parasitizing, like we have the tomato hornworm, we got see them with the little parasite wasp eggs on its back last year. And yeah, like for example, as far as like having the native plants to feed the ecology, some people will, like last year we were lucky enough to have a hummingbird nest over the driveway, and we don't put out any feeders for the hummingbirds, we just have our native plants, right? And I don't even know if like our neighbor who's like a couple 100 meters away, if they have hummingbird feeders or anything, but we have the nest and we didn't put any special feeders up. It's just all the plants that we have that the deep corollas, that the long tongue things like hummingbirds like, so the flowers that have the long sort of shafts.
And things, if you're like have a restaurant, you don't want people to be swarmed by the bees, those like fake hives or like paper wash things that you get at Canadian Tire, those are pretty effective. I always put one in my dad's pool shed because he's so allergic. My mom made sure I wasn't scared because my dad was so allergic as a kid. She'd always just tell me to stay still and close my eyes, and just the bee's important. It needs to be around. So trying to teach kids not to be scared. If you do need to get rid of a wasp nest or something, you can say it's at your daycare and it's not safe. You can actually pour honey around the hole, and a skunk, another one that doesn't get loved as much as they should, creature in their ecosystem, will come and eat it. So it's kind of like a better way, and you're not using chemicals and things like that, and it's going to have a good meal.
And occasionally, like, we'll get a wasp in the house that we're trying to get out, and Crystal came up with the idea of grabbing a flower and putting it up to the window or wherever, and the wasp often will get onto the flower and then you can walk away. And she never thought, hey, I should grab a can of pop or a sugary treat and put it up for the wasp, right? Like her head just went to, let's get a flower, and it often works.
Oh, very cool. All right, so we're kind of getting to the point where we are going to be taking some questions, but I wanted to ask each of you, um, if today's World Bee Day, we're celebrating bees, but also really the best thing we can do is to protect bees and pollinators and ecosystems. And I know, Liette, you're coming from a very different background, that you work with farmers and food, and Liam and Crystal, you guys work, with creating habitats in general. And although I do have a lot of food in my garden from what you guys put in, so the two do go hand in hand, absolutely, but just more agriculture versus just being able to have food around, which is fantastic. So my question for you is, for the people that are here today, and this is being recorded, can you give the top 3 things that you would recommend for people to do to help pollinators, help our habitats, however that story works for you in terms of how that would tie in with World Bee Day? And I'll let whoever wants to go first can go first.
Can probably start. My first thing is really to encourage more people to plant native species, native plants around their house, around, and you don't, even just on the balcony, it will be okay. It's not, it doesn't need to be that you have to have a big backyard or something. There's always possibility. Also encourage municipalities. We're trying to do that. In fact, this is a offshoot of the OSC 4 project, working now with a municipality to push them a little bit more in also putting native species instead of just a commercial annual kind of plants that don't last long anyway. So that's something that can be done. And also making sure that yeah, you try to reduce a lot of these commercial species. It's interesting recently because we had to discuss with that. People say, oh, well, I just need to keep the dandelion and it will be fine. The problem with the dandelions is that they don't have first as much nectar and pollen than native species. And if you look at what they need the most for the bees, for example, or any pollinators, is especially amino acids, which are coming from especially these compounds. And the dandelion is only around 10–14% in content of amino acid. If you look, for example, at pussy willows, which are native species around, they are more around 40%. It's the same with many of the plants like the black-eyed Susan. Many of these species are more towards the 30–45%. So it's a lot more nutritive. And in fact, you were talking about blueberry. But even the blueberry producer in Quebec now are putting around their blueberries new native species. And the reason is they realized that the blueberries were not giving the full amino acid range for the bees. So this is why we have to always be careful when we look at the monoculture of buckwheat, for example, or monoculture of blueberries, because again, we go back to biodiversity. And it's a bit like yourself. You would not eat steak every single day and nothing else, but it's the same for the bees in some way. There are some that are specialists, and I remember when we worked, this is a paper that was published in 1995, but we were working with Hepatica acutiloba. So this is a liverwort, it's a spring plant in the woods, and there's only one pollinator, Asclera, which is a beetle, a Coleoptera. So, that's the thing, that you have some that are very specific like that, but in general, they need to have a diversity. So that's also the important part.
Well, fantastic. And Liam and Crystal.
Well, some of the things is don't be scared to start gardening. You don't have to be an expert. We have cell phones and research where we can see how invasive a species is. Instead of putting common milkweed in your front yard, maybe a swamp milkweed or a butterfly milkweed, they're not as invasive. They are great for feeding different Lepidoptera. This is our swamp milkweed, and it's not going to make your neighbors angry, which I know we shouldn't care, but if we want people to also do this kind of thing in their yard, we have to make it seem less maintenance and beautiful. And also leaving the dead stock up of your plants. We need to see these as little apartment buildings, little overwintering communities. And if you leave it up now, the Asclepias incarnata, the swamp milkweed, the mother oriole in many different yards will use this for her basket nest. So leaving dead stock, and if you can't, at least a foot is always good. There's many things, especially with everything going on in the world. If you're feeling helpless, doing a little postage, your yard as a postage stamps, planting that so it's a living laboratory, a gas station for pollinators to come and feed, sleep, and do all the things they need to do for us is huge.
And I'll add, putting in the plants is great, but we need to make sure we're getting the blooms in the early spring and the late fall, right? Because everyone's got July and August flowers, but April, May, and September, October, November. So make a list when you're out in the fall of what's still flowering and grow more of those. But like Crystal said, if you have a small yard, you can do lots. So trees, they're ones that come out super early. Lots of we were mentioning willows before, flowering, fruiting berry trees like your service berries, blueberries. You've got, this is a black currant,
And
raspberries.
Someone had put one of these they bought from us years ago on their 18th floor balcony, and they said that they saw pollinators in the middle of Toronto on it. So it's pretty cool.
But yeah, people with small yards, you can get a lot of vertical biomass by putting in a tree, right? Like you could lay it down and have it way wider than your yard is. So trees are great. Reducing the amount of mowing and lawn space and the amount of chemicals that you're treating onto those spaces. And then also, supporting the farmers that are doing the right things by trying to plant these native plant rows and doing organic farming, making wise choices. That's not one we see the impact of immediately, but I feel like we all need to be, obviously supporting the organics and the people that are trying to make a softer impact for all the pollinators.
And with that, as you were saying, Uptown Waterloo, this is going to be our second year doing native planters. And then after the planters are done, we plant them. We planted a bunch at the library in the community. So we're sustaining this food and making it last, which is really cool. Ask nurseries to be providing native plants. Ask them not to be supplying the really bad invasive ones. And we had a fancy spa we did a bunch of gardens for, because people were saying, you have no native plants here. It's sterile ecosystems. There's some really cool research with Douglas Tall Amy is how you spell his name. And he makes it really fun on how we are having sterile ecosystems by not using native plants.
Yeah. So, and I'll add my 2 cents here too. So long before I was here at as the executive director at OCO, I have said your food choices matter in terms of pollinator health. And so, making food choices that are, not necessarily from monoculture crops that are, less necessary use of pesticides and fungicides and things that can actually disrupt the soil. All these things are really important in terms of pollinator health, in terms of how we choose our food, and being very mindful about food choices. And that's, if you don't have gardens and you don't have space to put in habitat for pollinators and to build ecosystems, you can make some of those choices with what you choose to eat. And that's actually super important. And as Liam was saying, in terms of those early flowers, trees are really underrepresented in terms of people talking about how much food, they do offer the early pollinators, especially when they're just coming out and they're needing good nutritional food resources. And with my beehives, I can see all different colors of pollen coming in when you can't barely see any flowers out. So they're flowering long before we have even noticed that there's things flowering. So, looking at the timing of when things are blooming. And I also want to say the other way that you can support these pollinators and pollinator health is through who you vote for. At the end of the day, like we've got our species at risk acts are being attacked, and our ecosystem protection is up for grabs for houses and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that are happening that are going to reduce habitat, that are going to introduce chemicals, and those things matter. And so Crystal and Liam, they got a job because people were saying this is so barren here. And you know what? Things happen when you complain about them. So use your voice, whether it's locally, provincially, federally, or globally. Use your voice and say, this is not right. These are the things that are important. If there is no habitat for these pollinators, there is no food, there is no air, and it doesn't matter what we've done because we are not going to be able to survive. So we do definitely depend on that whole thing. So I'm going to open up and thank you so much, Crystal, Liam, and Liette. Oh, Liette, did you have something you wanted to say?
There's a question in the chat.
Yeah, so I was going to open this up for questions now. So we've got some questions. So there's some in the chat, and then if you put your little hand up, you can either put your actual hand up or the little Zoom hand up. And Sammy, do you want to go ahead and do the questions there that are in the chat?
Sure, yeah. I see from Howie, said, I read recently that the thistle is an invasive weed, but not only are the flowers beautiful, the bees love them. What to do?
Yeah, thistles can be a nuisance plant in the garden landscape for sure. We do get the nice big thistle, the bull thistle with the big sort of pink flower that I will actually let go to flower in the marginal areas of my yard, and spots that I'm not going to brush up against. But the ones like there's one named Canada thistle, which is not native. It's a deceiving name. They're kind of annoying, and you just I just try to work at them. And again, yeah, not using sprays unless it was a time of dire need or something like that.
But even still, the sprays don't really work. Try not to let it go to seed in your neighbor's yard because it might make that painful for the, older person or the person that doesn't really like gardening do that. So,
but yeah, like the big bull thistle, I will let flower, and then once it's ready to seed, I'll get the yard waste bags and clip them off and put them in the yard waste bag so I don't have tons of them coming up. But yeah, they do you do find swallowtail butterflies and other pollinators that really like them,
and birds will make nests in them because it's a great defense mechanism for them.
So they do have a place. There are native ones, but yeah, a lot of the ones persisting are non-native.
Yeah, the invasive, the problem also, especially in agriculture, they tend to be very aggressive. And that's a big challenge. And we have to remember that the native one are adapted to our conditions. They're adapted to our birds, our insect and everything, versus this one will attract certain type. But it's in fact replacing, we thought very effectively replacing, I would say, the native species. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Do we have another question?
The only other question I saw was about there was one about recordings, and we will have it recorded and available on YouTube afterwards, and I'll send out a link to everybody when that is up. And then the last question I see here is from Laura. It says, what evidence supports or challenges the claim the honeybees negatively impact native pollinators in Ontario?
You're gonna,
Well-
those are fighting words. That I'm going to, I'll lead this by saying that there is um a very vocal group of people that in Ontario specifically that feel that there is competition between native pollinators, native bees, and honeybees. And the data there is there's some data, absolutely. But at the end of the day, the having these I've reviewed a number of papers having to deal with this particular issue. It's not that there's competition, it's the fact that there is not enough food for all of these pollinators, right? We need to actually really work on in terms of building out habitat, adding in food resources. Honeybees visit not all flowers, and there's definitely specialist bees who will visit only one type of flower that honeybee does not even visit. And as we were talking about, their tongues and their proboscis are different lengths. They have different ones that they can visit. One of the issues that is a huge concern is that honeybees do have pests and diseases that we don't see with other native bees. And managing those pests and diseases is actually a huge priority. And so my company, Best for Bees, we actually work with fungal powders for pest management inside beehives, because we do know that is a huge issue. We don't necessarily see a lot being transferred between the two, but in terms of how honeybees can impact native bees, these diseases and these pests, because they live like in high density housing, if you think about it like that, is just a lot more prevalent. So we have to be concerned about that particular piece of it. And it actually depends really on where you are in the world, in terms of what your native pollinators are. And when we've talked about native plants a whole lot today, but we haven't actually talked about why native plants versus other types of plants. And that's often because your native pollinators have evolved alongside the plants that are there, so that they, emerge, bloom, have the food resources when those pollinators need those food resources. And then they actually have the anatomy so that the two fit together. The plant fits with the pollinator, and sometimes you do get those specialists. And that's one of the reasons why having, obviously, biodiversity, but having plants that have evolved with your local pollinators is really important. So that's what I'm going to say on that. I know where Crystal and Liam they have their piece, so I'm going to let them say their piece now.
Honestly, we think like honeybees are amazing, and without the honeybee industry, the attention that would have been paid to the pollinator plight would have been like a fraction of what it is, right? Because there's like
Money.
billions of dollars in honey. So so it's awesome. Like neonicotinoid usage got curbed because people were paying attention to this kind of stuff. And yeah, I think the industry has definitely benefited the others because of the knowledge of, the threats happening. That said, like, I think some people, like, they think honeybees, because they maybe are foraging far from their nest, they might, like, as an amateur honeybee keeper, someone might think, I don't really need to I can just add honeybees. I don't need to add the plants because they're not even going to be foraging in my yard. But that's where we kind of run into like the flower deficit thing that Eric is talking about. Is like people just need, if they're increasing the amount of pollinators in an area, they should also be increasing the amount of pollen also available.
Yeah, I think seeing honeybees as like a cow or like a farm animal is a good way to do it. We don't all necessarily, we want to get milk, but we don't all necessarily want to have cows. So supporting people that do farm honey is a good way of doing that. I know during the pandemic, everyone wanted to be self-sufficient while everyone was putting hives up and not planting anything. I know that if you have a farm and you want to do honey, don't put it right near a natural area. There's certain laws in the states where you can't put honeybees near conservation area. I think we need to you know, always plant more plants, but if you're putting up a hive, you need to plant appropriately.
And we've had wild honeybees in our yard several times, and I'm actually kind of disappointed that the hole they were in, I think, was replaced by a starling nest. I don't know if the starling took them out or if they died, but
Yeah, it's interesting because how pesticide can become a real challenge for bees is for me knowing that in China for the lychee, for example, the fruit, because the pollinators are so low now in several parts of China, they are to do it by hand.
yeah.
It's a lot of work.
It shows how far we went, and I think in Canada we do not want to go that way. I think we really need to rethink about pesticide. We need to rethink about native species because we need to make sure to keep food sovereignty and all that. That's the best way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that comes back again to food choices. And of course, this is the Organic Council of Ontario. We do talk about, but it really is important at the end of the day that, you know, we reduce pesticide usage, we, you know, improve the habitat that we have. And yeah, honeybees are livestock. I absolutely I as a person who works with honeybees, recognizing that, you know, having honeybees is not a great way to add to an ecosystem. But it is integral to our pollination of farm crops. We actually rely on honeybee pollination, and without it, we would actually see a huge difference in terms of the foods that are being offered at our grocery stores. And we could eventually replace them with some other types of bees. So we do have mason bees, leaf cutter bees, bumblebees, etc., that can be used as pollinators, as managed pollinators too. But the way that we have set up our systems in terms of monoculture farms, big farms, and not allowing for the habitat for everything is one of those things that we just really need to be mindful of, is that the honeybees are already just part of the system, but it doesn't mean they're a better bee. It doesn't actually mean they're a bad bee. It just means we need to do more for native pollinators and getting all of those other bees out there. So yeah. All right. So we're gonna wrap up. I want to just thank everybody so much for joining today. Liette, Liam, Crystal, thank you for it's World Bee Day today, but I think World Bee Day is every day for you. And appreciate all the work that you're doing. And just to let you know, we are a member-based organization. We are not for profit. We do education, we do collaboration, we bring people together, and we support scientists like Dr. Vasseur and her team there at Brock University. So you can actually visit our website, the Organic Council .ca, if you'd like to have a supporting membership. We absolutely appreciate it. This is my, you know, telethon at the end of every talk that I give, but we really are dependent on support of our community. So if you do have a chance in terms of World Bee Day, that's one way that you can contribute. And thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to all the bees out there. We really appreciate you joining. And yeah, it will be recorded. Sammy, as she said, we'll put it up. So thank you very much. Happy World Bee Day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.